Welcome to Unmasking Social, where we talk about building real friendships and meaningful connections without masking who we truly are. I'm your host, Sharon Baum, a speech and language pathologist with an expertise in social thinking and how it relates to autism and ADHD, specifically with our teens and tweens. Let's dive in. Hello. On today's episode, we have someone who I have personally known from his middle school years, where he worked on social, and he comes on this podcast today to talk about how he found friendship and really tuned into his own identity while advocating and supporting those who were struggling with social communication and needed other supports in the classroom. Today, Spencer Ng tells it all. And as you are listening to this, he's either at Olin College of Engineering, where he's pursuing his passion for engineering, or on his way. So this episode drops in a very timely manner. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Unmasking Social. Sharon Baum here with a individual who has beat the odds. Someone who, when he was younger, was told that he would end up in a District 75 school, which is a specialized program for individuals with very, very limited and restricted abilities. Spencer Ng joins me today as he now is about to embark on college. He will be attending Olin College of Engineering after being on top of his class in terms of his grades, receiving a 1560, right, Spencer? A 1560?
Yes, 1560.
On the SATs, which is basically almost a perfect score. And the SATs, for those who are listening out there, not in the US, is our standardized test that measures your abilities based on how you perform on math and verbal skills, and is an indication for getting into college. Not only that, but Spencer has participated in many, many extracurricular activities. And on this podcast, we're going to explore some of that leadership that he has done on many different clubs. So Spencer Ng, or Spencer, we've known each other for quite a while. So I just want to say hello and welcome to the pod.
Hello. Thank you for having me on here.
Thank you so much, Spencer, for being here. I know that it is time that you're taking out of your busy high school last week of senior day. But I want to start off with, for the audience who probably would love to hear about your much younger years, which sometimes are hard to think about, but when you were really, really young, what is your first memory of being social?
It's a good question. I think the first memory that I can recall of being social would probably be, I don't remember the exact details of it, but it was probably me, I think in first grade, most likely.
Mm-hmm.
I was in Gillen Brewer, which is an elementary school in Manhattan. And I was just talking to one of my friends at our desks, which were huge to us back then. I mean, they're probably pretty small if I were to go up to it now, but they were pretty big from what I remember. And I don't know what we were talking about, but we were definitely enjoying ourselves to some extent.
That's very curious, because before that, you don't really have a recollection of being social. You remember people, maybe in your environment, perhaps your parents, your brother, because I know that they're a big part of your life, but you don't remember anything in terms of interacting.
It's very foggy during that time. Like you said, I could definitely remember people, but specific interactions that I had with those people would be extremely hard to borderline impossible for me to get details on, other than the fact that I just interacted with them as a fact.
Which makes sense, because for our audience who doesn't know, there is something called joint attention that develops in the neurotypical individual, where they attend with somebody else to a task. So for example, you both are looking at the same book together, that's social, right? Or you're both doing an activity together at the same time while thinking about each other. So it's not surprising that this is something that came later, because Spencer, you are not neurotypical. You are neurodiverse. And I would love to ask you, what do you like to be referred to as in terms of your learning differences?
I don't really have a specific preference with about how someone classifies me in terms of neurodiversity. You can call me neurodivergent. You could say that I'm autistic or that I have autism. You could say that I have ADHD. I don't really have a strong preference for either or.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure. So some people even call it ADHD now when it's the collision of autism and ADHD. For those who don't know, ADHD is something that's also neurological, and it impacts specifically executive functioning skills, which are skills that impact the ability of someone to prioritize, organize, and plan. And that can cause a great difficulty in attention. And that attention deficit can really further make things difficult with someone who is already autistic. So, Spencer, you mentioned this moment in first grade where there was somebody that you were just having a moment of joy with. And then when is the next time in your journey of childhood when you start noticing other people maybe just around you, whether it's a teacher or other children? Because I know that you had moved to another school, I believe.
Yes. So in third grade, I transferred to another elementary school, elementary and middle school.
Mm-hmm.
Both Gillen Brewer and Summit School were specifically built to teach children with disabilities or neurodivergent individuals. In terms of what I remember socializing with those kids at the Summit School, I was only there for, I think, 3 years. I wasn't there too long, but I do remember that I got along fairly well with most of the kids there. I talked to most of them. I built relationships with a lot of them, some stronger than others. Yeah, I mostly have positive experiences with those kids over there.
Okay, so it sounds like you started really interacting with people when you were in that school. And so that's when you started socializing because you remember that you were interacting with these people in different ways, whereas before maybe they were just around you. So this development of interaction started. And do you remember any specific moments or any people that you spoke to or that you noticed were around you, and what social looked like for you at that time?
I remember one kid, his name was Jacob, that I really did get along with. I actually still talk to him to this day.
Oh, wow.
He was probably my best friend. Not probably, he definitely was my best friend during my short stay at that school. We used to play a lot of games together. We hung out a lot during school. The way classes worked when I was in that school was a bit weird, just owing to the school's nature.
Okay. What was different?
You know what? I'm actually not 100% sure if we actually functioned any differently in this regard.
Mm-hmm.
But we pretty much always stuck together. Like, you always stuck with your homeroom. Now that I think about it, I think most K through 8 schools or grades K through 8 do function that way.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, our class was like really knit together. Like, there's very little separation. So you definitely knew everyone in your class within probably a couple of weeks.
Okay, so it was designed in a way where it was a small setting, and it also sounds like it was a setting for people who may be neurodivergent. So everybody there had a classification of being autistic or something else?
Right. I would doubt that every single person in there had autism, but I'm pretty sure everyone in there was neurodiverse, and owing to them having some sort of neurological disability.
And so this kid, Jacob, that you meet there, he becomes your best friend. And everybody always speaks about this friendship piece. And I'm sure, Spencer, we're going to talk about it later. But being that you do mentor others, you know that there are a lot of people out there seeking friends that are much younger than you, and they just don't know how to go about it. So what was your version of best friendship at that time? What did it look like? Did it look like you hanging out with him outside of school? Did it look like you just saying hello and goodbye to him each day?
I would say that for us, friendship was really, we just hung out. We didn't hang out in person outside of school that often. I'm pretty sure I'm pretty sure we did on a couple of occasions, maybe setting a play date or something, because I think we were probably between the ages like 8 and 12 at that point, and we didn't live like a couple of blocks away from each other, so it wasn't like we could just walk over to each other's houses, because one, we were like 8 or 12, and two, we lived quite a distance away from each other. But we did, I guess, hang out in a virtual sense, in that after school hours, we often played video games with each other a lot, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And that was pretty much our form of bonding and interacting with each other outside of school. Inside of school, we just talked, really. Just talked about anything. Maybe a cool new game console, or maybe about fidget spinners, because that was a thing back then.
Yeah, I remember those.
Yeah. I still have a little soft spot for those once in a while.
Oh, me too. I feel like I don't even know where to get one now.
Yeah, you could probably find one on Amazon for like a couple of dollars. So.
Probably, right? Everything's on Amazon these days.
But yeah, we would just talk about whatever, really.
So it's so interesting to me, because it sounds like you had made friendship. You were already being social without maybe knowing that you were being social. And those video games that you were playing with each other, for our listeners, is a form of social. Not everyone is going to socialize in the same way. And sometimes this virtual piece, which really came out during COVID, where people, started really communicating virtually, that still is social, playing a game, a video game with each other, right? So why do you think people maybe don't view that as social? I'm just as an add-on.
I mean, they are right to an extent that it isn't truly social, in the sense that you're like sitting next to the person, or you're sharing a meal with them. It's not social in that sense, but you're still interacting with the person. You're still holding live conversations with them. You're still able to create really strong bonds. Now, like, even today, like, you could video call someone, and you can even see the person's face. Now, since we were mostly playing video games, we didn't really see each other's faces, but we can still hear each other's voices if we decide to do an audio call or just a regular call.
Right.
We 100% have the capabilities to do that.
So it sounds like Jacob was your go-to friend, and maybe the only one in the class or school rather, that you were interacting with.
Not necessarily. I talk to, I don't remember all of their names, because it's been almost a decade at this point. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Right.
Spencer, you're going to college.
Maybe not a decade yet, but it's been a while.
So you were saying that it's been over a decade, and
there were still other kids that I interacted with. Once, I don't think I was as close to any of them as I was to Jacob. Like, just owing to the fact that I can actually remember his name.
Yeah, that's amazing that you still remember his name to this day.
Yeah, he's the only kid from that school that I still keep contact with. But it's not like he was like the only person that I talked to when I was at that school. I still talked to, like I said, it was still a very close-knit classroom where you knew everyone there. So
right.
Just through that, you're going to talk to a lot of the kids in that little classroom, because you're hanging out with them 5 days a week, 6 hours a day. But yeah, I did interact with, I'm not going to say every single one of them, but I interacted with a large chunk with them very frequently. And yeah, they were definitely really good people there. They're probably they're probably going to college, if not already in college, I would hope. And yeah, I was definitely not once again, not as close as with Jacob, but it was definitely like a standard friendship that you could see that you could have.
So this is a few years before middle school that you're in this school, and that's when friendship starts to become a little bit on your radar. Before that, it sounds like it wasn't really there yet, and now you're starting to engage in a way which is developing friendships. And then you enter middle school. And I know that there are some changes that you face there. Just naturally, going to middle school is a big change from not being in middle school. But then there were other changes because you were in a different environment. Can you speak about the different environment you were in and how that maybe impacted you socially?
Right. So I went to a new middle school, even though the elementary school that I had been up to up until that point had a middle school chapter. But I went to a public, regular New York City public middle school. So that was a huge change because one, I don't know anyone going in there, unlike most of the other years that I ascended to another grade. The public school environment was completely different because the school is no longer private, it's public. In all of the years that I was in school up until that point, I was in a class environment or a classroom that was exclusively only for children with disabilities. And now I'm one of the only, if not the only, I can't say for sure if there were any other kids with disabilities in there, but I'm one of the few kids in the entire school who has a disability. And so now the entire culture is shifted, and it's a lot harder to make friends because everyone is very, very different from you because up until that point, you've been in completely different environments. I've been interacting with neurodiverse individuals almost exclusively, and they have been interacting with a majority neurotypical population up until that point. So it was definitely a huge shock, and I did struggle at first.
What a big transition, just in general, just moving from private to public school. And then additionally, feeling like you're just one of a few with a student with a disability. I know that you were getting supports in your middle school and you were in a specialized program, but not the specialized program that they had recommended you for originally, where they had said that you need a more restrictive environment where people, just need a lot of support with learning. You're actually with a number of smart students in this program who had difficulty accessing the social piece. And so even though you were in that program, you were still in a large class with students where many of them maybe you couldn't relate to. Now, these neurotypical students, if we go back to middle school for a moment, you're getting some support, you're going to speech, you're getting maybe some occupational therapy, you're in this, what we call integrated class. But when you think about the neurotypical people around you, were they initiating with you at all? Were you just looking at them and just confused as to who these people are? Because I think a lot of times neurotypical and neurodiverse don't understand each other. So I'm curious what was going on in those moments through middle school.
During that point, I did interact with some of the students there. It was mostly stick with your homeroom setting once again.
Right.
So I did know most of the people, if not all the people in my class.
Right.
Maybe I didn't interact with them, but I knew them by name. I talked to us more than others, once again, but I didn't really have any very close relationships with anyone. I didn't really have any strong friendships. And I didn't really think about it too much, though, honestly. I think I just didn't really focus on it. It wasn't really something that I was too worried about. I wasn't really aware of it. It was just really a side piece of school that I just didn't really care too much about of how it went.
Yeah, Spencer, I hear that often where students will say that they're coming to school and their expectations academically. And so the purpose of school is to go to school and then come home and study. And I feel like that social piece isn't just an automatic thing in your brain of school is for academics and social. And I don't know if that was a similar situation for you where in your mind, okay, school's academics, I'm going to work on academics, but social maybe wasn't on your radar really beyond just
Yeah, it
maybe
wasn't really.
you had to work with other students maybe, right?
Yeah, it
Pair up
wasn't.
with them.
It wasn't really something that I was too concerned about. Like, once again, I did have. I was acquainted with people. I did have some sort of level of friendships with some people, and it wasn't like I was a complete loner, because I did know people and I did talk to some people, but I just didn't have a level of connection that I had at my old schools.
And okay, so it's interesting because you had less connections now, which in middle school, which makes sense because the transition is now you're faced with neurotypicals. And, I mean, things have evolved since then in terms of neuroaffirming and making sure that people who are neurodiverse are more accepted, and people who are neurotypical understand that they communicate in a different way. But even when you were in middle school until now, it just wasn't simply like that. And so was there a turning point for you in middle school where you started noticing social, or did you do anything that was social in terms of any leadership activities?
Not really. No, I didn't really ever do things like that in middle school.
Something about peer mentoring other students, where you were mentoring students.
Yes.
Why?
I mean,
I felt like
it's a bit of a different, I guess, time period, because middle school was when the COVID pandemic happened, as we would all know. So it's the peer mentoring part. It was definitely, you can definitely view it as a leadership activity that I did during that period of time.
Can you explain to everybody who's listening now who doesn't know what that was? As a peer mentoring individual or leader during COVID-19, what did you do for other students who were struggling in certain academic areas?
So during that point, I offered through Ms. Baum here, I was able to offer one-on-one academic supports and tutoring for students who are struggling academically at that point. I don't remember the details of it too much, just because it was online learning during that online COVID era that we were literally just thrown into haphazardly against our will. So, I mean, it went as well as it could have. It definitely could have been better owing to circumstances. But I didn't really, other than that, I wasn't really too active, just because of it. I wasn't really active in terms of leadership outside of that because of the COVID pandemic.
Which makes sense, because in general, social was taken away from a lot of people, although virtual socializing and virtual schooling, for many, it was over a year. Some came back sooner. I remember coming back to the schools that September of 2020, but for others like you, it was basically 7th and 8th grade. I mean, the ending of 7th grade into 8th grade. However, as somebody who was autistic at the time, I remember even overhearing some of the sessions that you would have with the students, and I remember you showing a lot of empathy to them and patience, which is really hard when someone is struggling with something and playing around with their camera and doing those things that could really be irritating when you're trying to get a goal done with them. So how did you use your own experiences, or if you did use your own experiences as someone who was facing some of those challenges of being seen, to help these people feel seen and feel supported?
My memory about that is a little bit foggy. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to do my best to respond here.
Yeah.
I mean, COVID was obviously, no matter who you are, it did something to everyone socially, unless you... I would say that for me, it was really just about understanding that little piece, that the pandemic really affected everyone in some way. You don't know what and how specifically it did, mm-hmm. because everyone was affected in different ways, in their own unique ways. Everyone responded to it differently. So it's really just about understanding that there really is no concrete thing to expect when working with people during this time period.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like expect the unexpected, because once again, everyone reacted in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
And so you just kind of have to accept it and do the best that you can, and just understand that there's a lot going on right now. No one knows what's happening. No one knows what will happen. And you just kind of have to understand that this uncertainty is just making everyone uneasy.
Which is great, because not that COVID-19 was great, of course not. That was awful. But it was a shared experience of humanity where we were all neurotypical or neurodiverse, thrust into this uncertain moment where we didn't know what was going to happen next. But I like what you brought up about flexibility. You may have not realized it at the time, but you were developing cognitive flexibility because you were starting to understand that, hey, this person may be in a different experience than me. You know, maybe their situation is different than mine. And because of that, maybe they're less likely to learn. So you're making all these predictions, inferences, really using what we call those metacognitive skills to really think about others. And even though you came out not really thinking about the social, you entered into high school maybe with a better understanding of flexibility, even just changing context. You were now in this whole new world throughout middle school, and you had to keep changing and shifting according to their expectations with many neurotypical students. So this leads us into the next phase of your life, which is the last 4 years, high school. And you just smiled. So high school, I think, was a really good time, a challenging time in many ways academically. You are graduating from Townsend Harris. Congratulations, Spencer. And something just changed within you. And for our listeners speaking who are seeking out friendships, can you explain how social changed for you? Are there any strategies that you can share that helped you with this friendship situation as you entered high school?
Yeah, so I think what sort of did help me in a weird way was the fact that everyone was starting from scratch again. We were all incoming freshmen into high school. So not only were we being thrown, not only were we doing the transition from middle school to high school, we were also coming back from online learning. So everyone was lost. High school, the whole, I guess, structure of classes was different, at least for me, because you weren't sticking around with your homeroom anymore. You had your own classes. You saw hundreds of people in total within your own little classes. I mean, it was a struggle at first, inevitably. I was, once again, I did make some friends, but I didn't make any friends that I was really close to until the very, very tail end of my freshman year, where I was able to, I met one of the people who I was talking with, introduced me to his friend group. And
wait, can I interrupt you for a moment? Yeah. One of the people you were talking with in terms of what? Someone that you would speak with every day?
Acquaintances to friends. Like we were somewhat close, but we weren't like really, really close. But we were definitely on good terms.
And you met him in Townsend Harris freshman year.
Yes.
In class. Okay. Mm-hmm.
So he introduced me to a bunch of his friends, and they were all like a little friend group. And that's when I really that's when I really figured out what friend groups were, because up until that point, the idea of a friend group was I had no concept of it at all. Like friends, I didn't really realize that friends really banded together in that sort of way, where everyone had a group where everyone knows each other, everyone talks to each other. I didn't really have that sort of idea yet. And so that's when I joined their friend group. And that's where I really started to develop extremely close relationships with them, with everyone in there. And that's how I guess you could say that's a final piece of evolution in terms of my social life up until this point. There's probably a lot more to go, but that's for later in college, I suppose.
Yeah. Where more friend groups will be developed. So this friend that you had this acquaintance for, because again, there are people listening, parents, educators, individuals who are also ADHD or ODHD, and they're struggling to make friends. And it sounds like that acquaintance that you had, it didn't just happen by accident. I mean, did you initiate with this friend one day and then you started talking and communicating back and forth with each other, right? Or no?
I had a class with him. I think it was Earth Science. I forgot exactly how we started talking to each other because it is not as long ago as elementary school, but it was some time ago. And I don't exactly remember how I started talking to him. But it was most likely through Earth Science, that class that I shared with him. It was most likely through that.
Okay, so you had a shared class and then you just started talking about other things that maybe you had in common or maybe didn't have in common. Maybe this is the key for those listening, is that the first step is to find that person, that one person, just one person, right? All we need is one person to start with that you are maybe in a class with and you can initiate. I think it's very scary though to make that first initiation for a lot of people. I don't know if you felt the same way.
It definitely is.
And then you then also did something that is very powerful, which is that you agreed to hang out with his friend. You didn't know them at all. You weren't the most social person. You were an introvert by nature, it sounds like. And on top of it, was dealing with these social challenges. And then you agreed to just hang out with all of them and go out with them, right? And so if there's a takeaway that you learned from developing this friend group that you're still close with today, I believe, right? Because you didn't throw them away.
Yeah.
You didn't have a falling out, right? What's the takeaway piece here for those who are struggling with making a friends and they just have trouble with perspective, taking flexibility? What are some things that happen for you that can happen for anybody with autism?
I think there's a lot of combinations that come into... There's a lot of factors that come into making friends. I'm going to speak in generally of just a school setting.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's definitely a combination of just things happening. Like you being in the right place at the right time. And also just you having the willingness to put yourself out there. And sometimes it works the other way around. Like sometimes someone else might approach you, but oftentimes you're going to have to approach the other person. I think that's what my main tip would be, is that sometimes you just have to take some opportunities and see where it carries you.
Take that risk, right? Because the risk assessment is what's the worst that can happen, right? The fear might be, I don't know if there was a fear for you, but a fear can be, oh no, I'm going to get rejected, right? But is it worth the risk?
Yeah, I mean, you could go off of, I guess, a risk projection model. And if you go off of that, you could really view it as what's the worst that could happen, really. Yeah. Like worst case scenario, you just don't become friends with the person.
And best case scenario, you have a group of friends for life.
Yeah. So you could just look at it like that. It's like you don't really stand to lose anything, but you really do stand to gain a lot.
And this group of friends, were they a diverse group of friends that you still have with different personalities, different interests, or all of you the same?
We definitely have some things in common with each other. I mean,
which is normal.
Inevitably, we have to. But yeah, we are a very diverse group of individuals. Some of us are neurodivergent, like me. Some of the others are neurotypical. But yeah, we come from all sorts of walks of life. We all have different personalities. We all have different viewpoints, but we get along. And
well, that's a good takeaway too.
Yeah.
that it doesn't have to be someone who's just like you or that experiences life the same way like you. It's okay for other people to have different perspectives about things. I know we are now in a heavy political climate and people can't express opinions anymore about anything, and that makes this even harder when we're thinking about friendships, but they can be different than you and you could still initiate, you could still engage. And some of your closest friends may not even be like meaning you said a couple of the people in your group are neurotypical and you guys are doing just great. You're super close and you really understand each other. It's this mutual understanding. So the risk was worth it for you, Spencer, right?
Yes.
And how did it change your life, if it did?
I have new standards, or I have new idea of how I should be doing socially. I know where I should aim to be, I guess, socially. Like I guess I'm like more versed in how to form new social connections. Like I know I'm a little bit more familiar with how you build those bonds. Obviously college with dorming and just the whole culture is gonna put like a new twist to it, but I'm gonna come in with more knowledge about how to basically just make friends.
Right. And it sounds like just your tone of voice and your expression that you want to do this. You want to continue to make friends and groups of friends. And it must be because of what it did for you in high school. What did it do for you in high school? What did high school become for you beyond just high school?
High school, like you said, beyond high school, in that it's a school where you learn. It wasn't just a place where I would do calculus or learn some algebra or chemistry. That also became a place where I could hang out with friends, or I could interact with people that I would see every day. It became something to look forward to in many regards, instead of just another day of English class.
So it enriched your high school experience, it sounds like, because you could look forward to seeing those people. And that was a great place that you came to, that you can get excited for school because we're going to actually see people who you connect with. That's really what social connection is all about. That's what friendship's all about, right? And so I'm so happy that you reached that point and that you're going to continue to build on this. I want to take us away a little bit from friendship to advocacy, because I know, Spencer, you're a big advocate for the autistic population and just the neurodiverse population overall. Can you tell us a little bit about why you started advocating for the neurodiverse population and their needs?
So I started advocating. Okay, let me just, I guess, give this as like a little bit of a brief background.
Sure.
When I first entered Townsend, they were very well respected and well treating of the population with disabilities, and that was one of the main reasons my parents and I wanted me to go to that school. But obviously, if you attend any sort of New York City public school, you know that this would be an outlier of a story. The majority, maybe not majority, but a very large chunk, if not a majority, of public schools in New York City do not treat their neurodiverse population properly, in that they don't exactly give those students the necessary supports and accommodations that they need.
Yeah.
So what I hope to do, because I created a little student-run organization, not necessarily a club, though I tried to do that. It was a little student-run organization that really aimed to shed light and rectify a lot of these issues by teaching students about their rights in terms of disability advocacy and their IEP. We were trying to teach them how to advocate for yourself so that you know what rights you really have as a student in obtaining the supports that you need. And that was a whole adventure that we went on. I say we because I worked with a couple other of my friends. That was a whole adventure that we did during 11th and 12th grade.
That's amazing. So not only did you work with these friends just to hang out, you worked with them to kind of change things because you were all in agreement, the neurotypicals and the non-neurotypicals in your group, that something needed to change and people needed to understand their individualized education plan, as we call it, which is a plan that sets up kind of what a student, where a student is, what they need, what the recommendations are for supports, and what goals they're going to accomplish. And so you did the heavy lifting work of that. And so speaking to advocacy, there are many who are listening who want to learn more about advocacy, and maybe they don't advocate for themselves. And you've also had to advocate for yourself in many situations, because sometimes the world doesn't really understand what's going on inside of all of our minds and all of our unique minds. So what would you say to, if and you can bring in an example or an experience of when you had to advocate for yourself, what would you say to those who are struggling because something is going wrong in terms of their interaction with their teacher or a friend, and they really want to advocate for themselves and speak up?
I would say that oftentimes when you feel that you aren't being supported properly, the law is often on your side. Maybe not all the time, but because it's the law, but the law is oftentimes on your side. And during your IEP meeting, during then is a very good opportunity to voice your opinion and your needs to school staff who are in charge of determining what supports and accommodations that you're going to receive for the following year. So knowing how to advocate for yourself during those IEP meetings is a very, very good way at making sure that you get those things that you need. But if during the IEP meeting there are disagreements and ultimately you aren't able to get the supports that you need, oftentimes you can't take legal action to secure what you need.
So was there a time that you sat in? Because again, for those who don't know, you can't sit in an IEP meeting at all ages. I believe that starts at a certain age, right? When you're in high school, even in 8th grade, I believe you could sit in an individualized education plan meeting. So was there a time that you had to advocate? I know some people have parents advocating for them, that you actually specifically said, hey, I'm advocating for this right now.
Yeah. So if for whatever reason you aren't able to go to your IEP meeting, oftentimes you can you should be telling even if you are going to the IEP meeting, you should tell your parents or whoever is going with you to the IEP meeting, you should tell them what you're going to say or what you're planning to do during that meeting and what you feel that you need from the school in order to succeed.
That's so important, that preview and letting them know and being in contact. And not everybody has the same relationship with their parents. So sometimes they have to take it into their own hands, right? And really speak up, because some people are closer with their parents. Others, I've met parents who, for a multitude of reasons, just aren't as involved and as knowledgeable, and they need more information.
Right.
So that can be tricky also.
Right.
Because then you really have to advocate for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
But you're going to be graduating and you're going to be moving on to college, Olin College of Engineering in Needham, Massachusetts. Did I say it right?
Needham.
Needham. Okay. Needham, Massachusetts. And what are you most excited about when you go to Needham from a social perspective? I know there's some angst.
Yeah. I guess it would be socializing in that college background. Everyone's pretty much living together. Mm-hmm. So I'm pretty curious to see how that works out for me.
And just going into it, and you mentioned earlier about that friend group, and you want to get a new friend group, right?
Yeah.
So I'm curious. So how are you going to go about seeking out a friend group? Are there any things that you can do or that you feel like you learned that you've done that can work?
I think I'm just going to have to see how it goes, honestly. I think I don't think you can force these sort of things. They just have to sort of happen.
Only because I've seen students, and I think you as well, go to social events. So I don't know if that's something you would recommend to other people, but there are social events that you can go to, extracurricular activities, volunteer opportunities where you meet other people in a more intimate setting. Is that something that you would recommend to others, or you feel like you should just let it happen?
I think those are definitely ways. I haven't been to too many parties. I'm not really into those.
You're not up for
Yeah,
Spencer.
like I'm an introvert. Those are like our worst nightmares.
Yes.
But
Smaller parties,
yeah,
though.
I mean, like
Maybe more
if
intimate.
those are if that's what you're into, then I see no issue with you using that as a way to socialize with people. It's probably a good way to do it, honestly.
And that's what you did, I think, in high school. You were part of all these different after-school activities.
Yeah.
Also.
I mean, they weren't like party groups, but
No, they don't have to be. Yeah.
Yeah, but like just interacting with interest groups is a really good way to connect with people who share interests with you.
So you've juggled many roles because you've been in clubs, you've been in charge of clubs. You've also navigated academics in terms of reaching really high places. You've really had all these internships. You've done all these amazing things. And I'm just thinking about your future going into college. Are you going to continue up with this advocacy work like you did in high school in terms of speaking up for assistive technology for students? Is this something that you're going to continue to speak about? And how are you going to juggle all of that? And how would you recommend others juggle all of them?
I think when it comes to juggling anything, I think knowing your priorities is very important, to know how much effort or time you should devote to something. At times that will require you just to put a certain activity on hold just because other things must take precedence over it. If I can, I definitely will engage in the disability advocacy community. But if schoolwork calls or social life calls to a point where I can't juggle everything, then it is what it is.
Somehow I think, Spencer, just from what I know of you as someone who's advocated before, I feel like you're going to continue to advocate.
Right.
It may not be every week, it may not be every few weeks, but if you were invited to speak somewhere to help advocate for more supports for individuals, I'm sure you would show up.
Mm-hmm.
Or that's at least what I'm thinking. That's my perspective.
Yeah.
But you mentioned the priorities, right? And that's all part of, for the listeners who don't know, and it comes up a lot in my podcast, executive functioning, which is, we mentioned earlier, the ability to prioritize, plan, take initiative. And bringing this all together, prioritizing is really important. And with executive functioning and time management, it can get really muddy, right? Because you're trying to do all these different things. And we spoke about this, I think, in the past, how the plate, you have this full plate of all these things that you need to do, and you have to prioritize, and you have class, and you have social, and you have family you have to speak to, and then you have advocacy, and then you have extracurricular, and the plate sometimes gets so heavy, and you don't want it to break. So I think it's also knowing limits and boundaries. Have you come to peace with some of that limit boundary?
Yeah, I think every year, I think the best way I can convey how I've been testing and pushing my limits is through my academic courses and work. Every year, I've been increasing the load or how much or the difficulty of my classwork, and just seeing like how well do I handle it, and just kind of acclimating myself to harder and harder classes that are going to require more time. And you can definitely push your limit and increase it, but like there's always going to be at least a temporary limit that you should respect, because you can't just like go from 0 to 100. You have to kind of make your way up there.
Yeah, so it sounds like you prioritize your health over pushing your limits, which I think everybody needs to do when they're prioritizing.
Yeah, there's always time to do both.
Yeah, so I really do wish you the best of luck in the College of Engineering. I am not worried about how much you're going to succeed just both in social and academics, although I know it is a transition period, which is hard in general for everybody. So I can imagine that it is not the easiest time, but it is an exciting time. But thank you so much for sharing so much insight into your communication journey and overall just your friendship journey and how others can make friendships. Because the people tuning in, I think, are going to get a really, really, really good idea of how they can take those risks, and they can make those friendship groups, and they can initiate, and they can engage in a multitude of ways that you shared with us. So Spencer, thank you so much for once again advocating and speaking up for your community.
Thank you so much for having me on again.
Of course, Spencer. Please come back.
Bye-bye.